were carved out and purchased by Marlin Private Equity. That was in about October or November of 2015. We basically kind of pulled the core values from Live Ops, plugged them in over here, and they were the acts of wow. Which, about a year later when we were getting ready to rebrand, Baker and I had multiple conversations about the fact that we thought that there should be an evolution of the core values. And so that's really, the iterative process that we went through to find core values that we thought were both representative of who we are today, and also somewhat aspirational. I think you made a comment that I really liked, that they're...
Well, there were values we'd need to live into, right? So it was a combination of things we cared about, whether or not we were perfect at them already, but we saw them as the gap measures needed to sort of fulfill our destiny. And so we wanted to document them, and we knew it couldn't be a decree, right? You can't just write these things, throw them on posters, and expect everyone to live them.
Right.
You've got to hire to them. You've got to coach and do performance management with the values. You've got to embody them as a leadership team, and you've got to reinforce them with awards and seriously just repetition.
Yeah.
They are in order, right? And there is an intuitive build to them, and there's a reason that humanity first is first. In some of these, I really think the subtext is so important, because what you might intuit from the main label doesn't necessarily resonate universally the way we intended it. But humanity first is one that does and should. It's just something that we forget in our daily lives. Just like it's easy to be a little less aware of the humanity in the car next to you when they cut you off in traffic. The same thing happens with email and with each other. And so we even put in that parenthetical, including ourselves, right? We treat ourselves with humility, kindness, and respect. And there's always more examples and ties to all of these. For me, humility is a really neat topic. We think of ego as arrogance, and humility sometimes is thinking less of ourselves. There's a quote right here on my wall, and it says, humility requires not that we think less of ourselves, only that we think of ourselves less often. So for me, humanity first is really about the empathy needed to build effective relationships, first and foremost, just with each other, within our departments, between our departments, within the organization, and then out into the market to prospects, customers, partners, vendors, by the way.
Absolutely. And I think, to Baker's point, we're in the interviewing process, right? These are things that we're talking about and that we're evangelizing. We want people to be aware of that this is sort of the way we operate. This is how we roll. And so want them to understand. And we're hearing and we're seeing that people are excited in that process about coming into an organization that articulates their values this way.
And in truth, in today's high-paced, technology and data-driven environments, just being nice is a really easy way to differentiate yourself and to attract people to you, right? Whether they're prospective employees or customers.
Progress over perfection. This is, in some ways, this is probably one of my favorites. And I think it really is, representative of how we are as an organization and the mode of operation we're in today. The way that Baker stated earlier that, these are not necessarily set in stone for all time. It might be that that's one where, we change that as we evolve. But right now, what's most important is that we're highly iterative. We need to have forward momentum, and we need to not necessarily wait until something's perfect before we're ready to move forward with it. And, the point is that we want to make each day better than the day before, which is the statement I think I like the most in here.
So this isn't kind of sort of maybe my favorite, this is my favorite. And earlier iteration on this label for me, because it's one I've used on my teams across companies for years, is permission to fail. Mm-hmm. And the reason is, particularly when we're attracting talent from larger companies, something happens in big companies, and that is you get ahead in your career by withstanding the attrition around you. Essentially, don't screw up, and you'll get ahead because other people will, or they'll leave. In a small company, you can't afford to wait that long, and you don't need to mitigate risk that way. If we are focusing on humanity first and we've established trust, then we can go next to say, our very best thinking, action, and choices have gotten us to where we are today. And we all agree that where we are today is not where we ultimately want to be. And if we're going to go one step further, we're going to have to try new things. And I've watched 2 boys now learn to walk, and they fell down a whole bunch, but they never once said, oh gosh, I'll never learn to walk, I'm not going to get up. They just do it without even thinking about it. It's automatic. They fail, they learn, they do better. They fail, they learn, they do better. They fail, they learn, they do better. And we want to create an environment where our people can do that here and do so safely. It doesn't mean that we don't honor our commitments, and we'll get to that in future values, right? It doesn't mean that we make the same mistakes over and over again. The number one reason I see people procrastinate on big initiatives, myself included, is because they've never done them before. And so it's not, hey, how's that going? Well, I haven't finished yet, right? That's what we say. But the truth, it's I haven't started it yet, right? I'm too overwhelmed, and I don't know where to start, and I'm afraid I'm going to look stupid. Action is like the number one best motivator. And if you can just get people moving on things and get out of fear of failure, then you can actually deliver that packaged iterative value, in each and every day you're a little bit better, right? It's putting pennies in the savings account. The other aspect of it I think is important and a lot less long-winded is that in an environment like ours, there are so many strategic opportunities available to us that corporate strategy changes quickly. And you have to deal with some cost fallacy and change management. Change is hard. And you've got to be willing to say, I know this is what we're focusing on for the last 3 months, but we're going to do something different now because it's the right thing to do, and what we've done up until now doesn't matter. So roll with the punches, take the afternoon off, have a drink and a cry, and let's get back to business tomorrow, going in the new direction.
Radical accountability. Baker touched on this a little bit in the progress over perfection. I think, and this goes alongside of, kind of marries well with it, is that, we don't want to be afraid to fail. We don't want to be afraid to make mistakes. But when we do, we want to be the first one to raise our hand and say, hey, this is where we are, and this is how we're not going to be in the same place moving forward. We are interviewing for this against this as well. Knowing how you're showing up, and then, when you are in a state where you're not where you need to be, acknowledging that and being very transparent about it. The other piece is, honoring our word, keeping commitments, and looking for opportunities. I love this sentence, to act in the service of others. Looking for ways to seek accountability, to take things on that we're not necessarily being asked to, but we know that we can make a difference across the organization.
So I don't think we could possibly put enough subtext on this one to align it to my interpretation. This notion of accountability, right? Like the word is almost loaded because it's like we tie it to responsibility and metrics and like how am I being measured and scored. And it's important that we put data up for the sake of the last value, right? Progress over perfection. We don't make the metrics look good. We see what they're telling us about how we can be better, right? Radical accountability for me is I'm not a leaf in the wind who is just going to be sort of blown around by the circumstances outside of my control. I'm going to identify every circumstance I can control and take accountability for it. And that's how I can shape the future to better align to my vision.
So above and beyond, this is one that I think on the surface seems maybe a little more standard across. Maybe you've seen this at other companies. I think there's some subtext in here that I think makes it very unique to us, and that's, of course we want to go above and beyond. We want to exceed expectations. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to ensure delight of our customers, and that our customers are everybody. They are ourselves here internally, our vendors, our partners, our customers' customers. The thing in here that I always make a point of calling out is simplifying the complex. Going above and beyond is more than just, hey, I'm going to follow this process because somebody told me this is what I have to do. It's identifying areas to create efficiencies, to collaborate, to work across the organization. We're an incredibly complex organization. We've been carved out from another company, stood up on our own, succeeding in that, but there are inefficiencies that exist across a lot of the different things that we do internally in some of our systems, and I think if we're always looking for that lens to simplify things, making things simple is very difficult, and I think if we're keeping that lens and always working towards creating those efficiencies so that in the end we'll actually have ability and scale to take on more, I think that's really important for all of us to think about in our roles day to day. So that's really what that core value means for me.
Above and beyond has a connotation of surprise and delight. It's the Zappos thing, right? And I love that, and it's fun. It's not, by the way, if we're going to be a data-driven, accountable company, it's not statistically proven to be a superior model for business. It doesn't drive more satisfaction than simply meeting expectations. So this is, to me, it's more about meeting unstated expectations. It's about taking on roles, finding ways to serve beyond expectation. Our VP of Product Management, Matt Despain, said in one of our offsite strategy meetings that the company is the product, right? And so if you look back at these first 3 values we've been talking about and you put all those things together, if the company is in fact living up to and embodying those 3 values, then that is a competitive differentiator. It's a strategic advantage internally, and it also shows in everything we do. And it gives us more synergies and more productivity than our competition could possibly muster. I do think that you have to be careful with this one, not to read into the cliche. It's important to focus on the subtext this one. Simplifying the complex. We talk about elegant solutions. Every line of code should be essential, right? Doing more with less. Like, we have to be stewards of our resources, not just the money and not just the budget, right? Time, energy, our people's moods, those kinds of things. And then delivering more value than we ask for in return. I think that's important as an employee. I think it's important in sales. The standard rule is you should deliver 10 times more value than you're asking for in return. This is my second favorite. Honestly, I love the feeling it gives me, right? Because we cannot fail if we do not quit. Above all, we persist. If you look back through the lives of great men and women throughout history, there's a single common thread, and it's adversity. And it's that adversity which we find is exactly the preparation for greatness. And persistence through adversity is what wins. The greats of history simply did not give up. James Michener has a quote that character is what you do on the 3rd and 4th try. There's a book out there right now by Tim Ferriss called The Obstacle is the Way. You know, I try and scare people away in interviews because I want people who embrace the fight. And one of my kind of standard lines is, you know, I don't go home at the end of the day because I'm done. I go home at the end of the day because I'm done, right? Like, I've left it all on the field and I'm going to come back to fight another day. But there's always more we can do. Culture in the leadership is a huge part of why I came to this company. And if there is any one value, but it would be no finish line. Will to win and persistence. And look, it says in here, we're never discouraged. That's why I'm here, and that's why for me it's kind of the end cap on all these values and sort of the overlay that makes them all work together.
Yeah, I think this one for me is, even though I love the subtext, I love the simplicity of this value because I don't think it's necessary to get the gravity of the core value. I think it definitely adds to it. And much to Baker's point, one of the things I talk to people about in the interview process is dealing with ambiguity. And I think we have so much of it around us, to your point. There's quite a bit of it, and so I think it is that persistence. It's forging a path where one doesn't exist and knowing that you could end up at a dead end and you turn around and you figure out another path. So this is probably my second favorite one.